Hey guys, welcome back into the Jury Duty podcast. We are your hosts, Lindsay, and we have a Kimberly.
Hello.
Welcome back. If you're a first timer, welcome in. Please do all of the YouTube things like share, subscribe, comment if you feel necessary. We're just glad that you're here and willing to hang out with us for a little while. So, we are introducing part 2 of our Vinnie interview.
Well, it's more like not like an interview. It's more like a really wild conversation because we don't actually interview him.
No, we just kind of chat. I guess, with having people on the podcast, my first thought is like we're interviewing them, but it just doesn't really always turn out that way. It's kind of like a conversation.
Yeah.
But if you haven't seen part 1, go back. It's phenomenal. He talks about his experience on jury duty, and it is a wild story. So go back.
It really is. I don't know how he managed. I mean, I'm glad he did. It's a great story.
Yeah.
But it would be his luck that that's the case that he gets.
So I will say this podcast is different than part 1. We talk about several different cases, several different questions. Like we're kind of all over the place, but it's all true crime related. Some tangents.
If you're a Vinnie fan, you know tangents are part of the norm, and
If
we
you
got
know,
our
you
very
know.
own special tangent. I think it's because
Mhm.
we just had such a great time. Vinny's such a chill person. He is so much fun to talk to.
Yeah.
And the conversation just kind of flows where it goes naturally. And
Mhm.
by the end, we were like, what did we talk about the whole time?
Yeah.
We were going to ask him questions,
Yeah.
but I think it was so much more interesting because he took us on a tangent ride, and we were all for it. And with all the heavy stuff happening right now in the news, especially with true crime, it was probably a much needed segue down a lot of rabbit holes.
Yeah, you know how like you call a friend, and I'm just gonna pretend like Vinny and I are friends.
I mean,
Like
he's our bestie.
yeah, like you call a friend and you just kind of like start talking, and then you're like, okay, why did I call you?
Yeah.
That's kind of one of the situation. Anyways,
We just wanted to introduce this video. We planned to do this afterwards anyway, so we could give you the
yeah.
context and set the table. But
Yeah, so this is future Lindsay and Kimberly right here. Okay. So we hope you all are doing well. Please like, subscribe. Vinny's things are going to be linked down below. All of our things are going to be linked down below. We love you all. We hope you are well. And without further ado,
more tangent time with Vinnie Politan. Make good choices, friends, or you might see them on the internet. Bye.
Vinny, what made you hop onto Mamta's story?
Yeah.
I read it, and it was to me it's the missing mother.
Yeah.
It's the missing mother part of it, and then there seemed to be an outpouring of support from the community, and it seems like there wasn't enough being done about it. At least that's what I was seeing. So, and it was a tough one for us to jump on because there were some getting some of the information and then finding people connected to it. But we found this journalist, and she was amazing, who was speaking to the family in Nepal because she speaks the native language.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we hooked up with her first, and then I really got a much better understanding for it.
Yeah.
And I think that was it. Because I was like, no mother is leaving her 1-year-old.
No.
It's not happening. And she was a nurse, a pediatric nurse. I mean, children were her life. There's no way she is just getting up and leaving. And then when I found out that at one point she did leave the house, but then came back, I was like, this guy is going to use that as much as he can in the story. But it was difficult trying to figure out the whole relationship situation because it was not traditional, and there were some cultural issues going on. So it was tough to try to uncover, but I'm glad that investigators continue to work on it and continue to work on it today.
Well, I think people watch too much television sometimes. I was one of those people initially, probably in one of your chats. It's like Manassas Park Police Department. They're not NYPD. They're not LAPD. They are just PD. And we don't have stuff like this happening here so regularly that they're equipped. My concern was, as a woman of color and as an immigrant, that she was going to get completely lost in the sauce. But it happens literally the last few days of July. And even though those charges were updated recently, he was going to trial last week. That's incredibly quick. It was 4 months, I believe, from getting all the evidence out of the house to being able to charge him with murder. That's DNA. That's all the forensics. That's actually not that long, especially for police department that doesn't do this stuff all the time. I think people are used to getting that 60-minute full circle. Everything's resolved. It's just not how it works. I would say that Mario Lugo, the chief of police, is actually reinstalled some faith in humanity from the community as far as the police work goes. There's a lot they can't tell us. We have to remember, as a community at least, this didn't take 4 years. It took 4 months. And that almost never happens. The perspective, I think, just gets a little skewed as far as what it looks like the police were doing and what they were actually doing.
Right. Yeah.
Which is
And
frustrating.
the other part of bringing the charges in a case where no body has been recovered, you want to push it as far as you can, right?
Yeah.
Because once you make the arrest and you begin with the charges, that's when the clock starts ticking, right?
Yes.
For speedy trial rights, et cetera, you get on the calendar, all of that. So you want to try to push it as much as possible, which is why in a lot of cases like that, they begin with, well, what can we charge? They pushed it up until the trial date, which was coming up. And then they said, okay, let's go in and let's complete the charges here and get onto a different cycle, a different calendar. But the cases without a body can be prosecuted, and they have been successfully. Sometimes it's even easier to prosecute them to a certain extent because there isn't any argument about cause of death. The argument is, well, is she actually dead? Right? But it's a lot easier to say someone is actually dead when there's blood and they're missing and there's no sign of life anywhere. Then you can kind of put together the pieces, but you don't have an autopsy that may give you results that point in a couple different ways and can raise some reasonable doubt. So it can be done. I think in this case, there's a real good chance because of all the other evidence they have, plus his statements and the circumstances surrounding all of it. So, but the timing of it, again, they'll push it like they did with Larry Miliete in the Maya Miliete case. They still haven't found Maya out in Chula Vista. So it's just par for the course.
Lindsay, you know what I was going to ask about the no body, this perceived uphill battle. One would think if you're updating your methodologies, your technology, your investigators are equipped for no body situations. I said, wouldn't it be easier? No one's going to argue with you about manner and cause of death. And the evidence here is so overwhelming. I was like, I really need to know how Vinnie feels about the no body case. And you just told me. So that was my biggest question.
We've had a lot of no body cases lately in the true crime world.
There's two similarities that concern me, Lindsay, and you know which ones they are.
Well, we have the mom, the Simpson,
Suzanne
Simpson, Troconis, Walsh, like all of these cases that are, no body cases. It seems to, I don't want to call it a trend, but it's happening right now. It's just very interesting.
Well, how about Suzanne Morphew, which was a no-body case, and he was charged, then they found her body, and now he's not charged. But there's a whole nother backstory to that one.
Right. Yeah,
But what's important here, and in looking at how you prosecute the case, there was like this old trick that criminal defense attorneys used to do in a case like this, where they would say, the defense calls Mamta Bhatt to the stand, right? And then if the jury looks back to see if she's walking through the door, they would go, aha, that is the reasonable doubt right there. You thought it was possible. So we don't know if she's like, that doesn't happen anymore. But that was an old trick that was used.
I like that trick though.
Yeah.
That's a good trick.
Ladies and gentlemen, you turned around.
Well, Vinnie, if you're on the defense, what kind of juror are you looking for?
Well, for this case,
for Mamta.
What's interesting is you want, and this is, I think, like engineers.
Okay.
Who are very black and white. They want a definitive answer. There's no,
Men.
not like not someone who can sort of put things together, but someone who wants, like, I know engineers put things together, but an engineer really likes things that are black and white. 1 + 1 = 2. I've got this, I've got that, I've got this, I've got that. And it all makes sense. That's the type of person, because you don't want a man, because a man is going to believe he did it. It might be a woman, but in the case, because it's a woman and her child, you're not, you can't do a broad stroke like that. I'm thinking someone who really wants every single loose end tied together, or you import 12 people from Pinellas County, Florida.
Florida. I was just telling Lindsay that I'm so glad things are not happening right now in Florida, because that's where she is. And if Florida ever fell off the map, we'd have nothing to talk about.
Well, I always reference Pinellas County, because that's where they gathered up those 12 people that they brought to Orange County, who said that Casey Anthony can go home.
As much as I hate to say it out loud, I understand the jury verdict in that case, although I disagree with it. I understand how they got where they got. I would not have voted that way, but I don't fault them for the way that they did vote. They wanted to know exactly how she specifically and literally did what they say she did.
Right.
And in the absence of knowing that, they didn't feel comfortable. That, and as much as I enjoyed watching Jose Baez get sort of pinballed around a courtroom verbally by all of the state attorneys, they overcharged her.
Yeah. Well, here's my response to this, and it's been pretty consistent through the years. What the defense was good at, number one, was Jose Baez bonding with the jury. And I noticed this during the trial, because we put together a montage of it. Every morning he would say, "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen." And in the beginning, they'd be like, "All right, good morning." By the end of the trial, we start I think in April, and now we're in July, whatever it is. By the end of the trial, he says, "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen." And they, in unison and enthusiastically, would say, "Good morning." The jury loved Jose. The jury hated the arrogance of the prosecution. And the arrogance came from the fact that the prosecutors knew that Jose Baez at that time was not very familiar with the rules of evidence.
No.
He just wasn't. Like,
now
he had co-counsel that helped him through it, but he wasn't. He had never tried a case like this before. But it doesn't mean he couldn't try it, and he did, and he won. But like, that little part of it seeped into them, and a lot of the expert lawyers I had on latched onto that. But the jury doesn't care.
Right.
What the jury feels is he's acknowledging us every day, number one, and number two, he's not being sarcastic and mean and arrogant. And they liked him, which means they're going to, go his way a little bit more, trust some of his arguments. And then what they also did very well in the closing argument was they had this big chart talking about reasonable doubt, all of that. But they were able to get this jury to attach the reasonable doubt standard to places where prosecutors don't have to prove things beyond a reasonable doubt. Right. The only thing that you have to prove, and I go like this because I was a prosecutor, beyond a reasonable doubt, are the elements of the crime.
Yeah.
Right.
Not every fact in the case. Not every fact in the case. Yeah. But they wanted, like you said, the jury wanted to know beyond a reasonable doubt exactly how it happened.
Right.
And sometimes it's difficult. And this case was blown, and in part by the state attorney because of the arrogance in the courtroom, right? But one of the other problems was the investigation. And there's two people responsible for that investigation. One, Roy Kronk was the meter
reader.
Yeah.
Okay. So he's and when you're a meter reader, I didn't realize this, like, you're out reading meters all day, but nature calls.
Right.
So he would go to the bathroom in the woods. So he was in their neighborhood, and he was in the woods, and he saw her and makes the call. And when they show up that night, it's a little rainy. the responding officer, he's trying to tell him, now I guess it's dark, trying to tell him where it is. The responding officer slips and falls in the mud and gets so frustrated and angry that he doesn't take another 8 steps into the woods to find Kaylee before the evidence dissipates, right?
Right.
So it doesn't happen that day. Now, it's like 2 months later, or I don't know the exact, I forget, 2 or 3 months later, after torrential flooding and rain and everything else down in Central Florida, Roy Kronk's reading meters again in the neighborhood, goes back in the woods, sees it again, makes the call. This time they go and they retrieve it, but all the evidence and any toxicology or anything else, it's all gone.
And it's degraded. It's Florida.
Yeah.
Sorry,
so
Lindsay. It's Florida.
that first police officer, and if Roy Kronk, instead of calling police, had just walked down the block and spoken to one of the 50 media outlets that was parked outside the Anthony household and said, listen, I think I saw her, they all would have run into the woods. We would have had video of it. There was no way, like they would have done it.
Yeah.
But that one police officer who responded didn't. He ended up no longer being a police officer. I don't know the story behind it. The second mistake that was made was the forensic examination of the computer.
Oh, the chlorophyll.
Yeah.
The
Right.
Yeah.
They only looked at one search engine. Casey was using Firefox. They never searched the Firefox, and that's where all the most incriminating searches are. Jose Baez, during the course of the trial, was shocked that they didn't bring this evidence. He was expecting them to. He was anticipating it, and prosecutors and their forensic people completely missed it and botched it.
I remember that.
That's where the incriminating searches were. And she's the only one on Firefox because remember, her mother tried to fall on the sword for her about the chloroform.
Chlorophyll, grass. I'm like,
So the overcharging, where that becomes an issue, is, and I don't think it's for the jury, but I think it's for the way Cindy Anthony testified. She did not want to lose her daughter.
Right.
So she was fudging her testimony a little bit to help her daughter.
Likable.
No, she's not a very sympathetic person. And I do feel terrible for the two of them. It's the same way I feel about John Ramsey. Like, I feel terrible for him. I feel terrible for Cindy Anthony and, oh my God, I've just blanked on his name. George Anthony.
Yeah.
George was the villain.
George was everyone's favorite villain. I felt, I'm sorry. No man that desperate is going to behave the way that he did after all this was said and done.
Now, here's the thing about the defense, and I always point this out. Like, how do I, when we talk about the actual truth, right? Not like what happened at the trial, but the actual truth of what happened. Mm-hmm. Don't forget, with this defense, they went fishing for a defense. Mm-hmm. They took a look at all these different men and then landed on George at the end. First, they were going after the fiancée, Jesse Grund. They were going after her current boyfriend, DJ Anthony. They're subpoenaing records. They're investigating them. They targeted Roy Kronk, the meter reader, taking a look at his background. Now, and then at the trial, no, all along it was an accident. We knew what happened. She was never missing. Well, if all along you knew what happened and you knew that she was
never
missing,
told anyone.
Why would you investigate Jesse Grund? Why would you investigate DJ Anthony? Why would you investigate Roy Kronk? You're wasting money, time, and resources chasing someone. Why? Because you needed a boogeyman for the trial, and you settled on George because George had a mental breakdown and engaged in an alleged extramarital affair during the search for his granddaughter with one of the women who had volunteered to help search, who I interviewed live on the air during the trial.
Everybody loves a philanderer that can just, it's.
George was a broken man. I mean, he was a broken man. But in no way, like, and to accuse George of essay when during your opening statement, yet you present zero evidence through the course of the trial of it. But what they're trying to say is that he was going to do it to her.
Right. Yeah. Smoke mirrors. They need a villain. They set him up pretty early.
Well, they set him up to be the villain.
Yeah. At one point, didn't Kaylee like drowned in the pool?
Oh, that was their ultimate story, is that she drowned in the pool, and George was like while you were sleeping, taking a little nappy nap. So what happened was, and it's your fault, you're going to hell. And that was their story.
Yeah.
So, so they take an accident and make it look like murder.
You don't hide accidents, and you sure as hell do not spend that much time spinning people's wheels over an accident. It doesn't make any sense.
And you don't, it's crazy. And plus, don't forget, like that night, she's hanging out with Anthony again. Oh, yeah. You know, they go to Blockbuster to rent a movie.
Target.
Yeah.
Blockbuster. Yeah.
And then one other thing. Don't forget about the duct tape.
Right.
This was the piece of evidence we didn't show on the air because it was when the head is lifted up.
The mandible bone.
Right. Is lifted up and you can see where the duct tape was and how her hair was still in it.
Yeah.
You don't need duct tape on an duct tape doesn't just get there all by
So you're going to have an accident and you're going to frame yourself for this, what would you do that? And don't forget the first villain in all this was Zanny the nanny.
Zanny the nanny, Zenaida.
There was at an apartment that she had looked at, there was a sign-in list of people who were looking at the apartment. And one of them was a woman named Zenaida Gonzalez, who was represented by whom?
I don't know.
Morgan & Morgan, for the people.
For the people.
You know Morgan & Morgan?
For the people, yes.
It's like the biggest plaintiffs law firm in the world.
Yeah.
And they're from Orlando. That's where their base is. And they're the ones who released the infamous depositions of George and Cindy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like, remember, those were floating around pre-trial for a couple of years. All that. So.
Yeah.
I just know that when Dr. G, the medical examiner, was talking about that duct tape, I've never had more faith in a medical examiner or a medical expert in my life. The way that she
was not having it. Yeah.
Why exactly, just in case your common sense meter is broken, why duct tape has no place in an accident and it's not necessary to put over the mouth of a living or dead human being. I could not find, it was airtight. I couldn't find a way to go, no, Dr. G, you don't know. What do you know?
Right.
No. Yeah. It was so compelling the way sometimes lawyers explain reasonable doubt too, that I absolutely love.
There's two different ways to say beyond a reasonable doubt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Either as a prosecutor or a defense attorney.
Okay.
I, as a prosecutor, would say beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right. Not any doubt.
Whereas the defense attorney says beyond
You're saying doubt. You go outside tomorrow and it's wet outside. It must have rained. That guy says your neighbor hates you and puts their sprinklers next to your house every night to saturate your grass and therefore just drown your lawn. They could both be true. Which one is reasonable?
Yeah.
Exactly.
But that's how people like Jose Baez, bless his heart, he's everyone's favorite rock star now. It worked out for him.
He's doing it right now. I saw
he makes a lot of money. I mean, he gets people who are literally guilty, like the football player who was guilty of taking another life, right? And then oh no, but this one he's completely like innocent of crazy.
I know. He's representing someone in the news right now. What's her name?
He's got the woman down in Florida.
Yeah, the woman down in Florida. Exactly.
With the millionaire parents.
Yeah, with the millionaire parents. I saw a picture of him. He's pretty jacked. I know that's like a side.
Yeah.
Jose Baez?
That case, Jared Bridegan is the victim in that case.
Yeah.
He's a Mormon. The defendant is his ex-wife, who's a Mormon, but she kind of, broke bad a little bit. Got a bunch of tattoos, was hanging at the gym and ended up sleeping with the guy from the gym or whatever.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
I'm going to have to read up on that one.
Yeah. So it's a murder. It's a for hire case. So we'll see if
didn't he represent or and part of Harvey Weinstein's cases?
Yeah, but then he dropped off.
Yeah.
He was there for he had a cup of coffee. Had a cup of coffee with Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah.
Oh, that gives me the heebie-jeebies, but sure.
Yeah, Harvey Weinstein, he's not going to be with us much longer, I don't think.
We're also not claiming him in the tribe either. I'm going to need my people to get their shit together. It's not a good look. The Adelsons, like, come on, man. Can someone
don't you love the Adelson trial?
Donna.
Oh, Donna Adelson. No. he will not get custody of my grandchildren. That will not happen.
Vinny, I keep waiting for her to come in with like a dachshund sweater, you know, like that old women typically wear.
Oh, that's too genteel for her.
Like, I would never.
She can't clutch pearls. That's not the Jewish way to do things. The guilt and the gaslighting is how they get the job done. I have a Jewish mom. I love you, Mom.
But my question is, Vinny, are they going to get Wendy?
This is the most unusual prosecution that has really taken its time and gone one at a time. And for each one that they've gotten so far, they needed
Wendy.
They needed Wendy.
Yeah.
I don't think it's outrageous to think they may attempt to go after Wendy. I think it's a type of case where, as crazy as it is, it's not as strong as the others because there's a little buffer going on. So the trial ends up being about her relationship with her brother and her mother, right? What is that dynamic all about? And also some of her movements that morning were a little strange in the phone calls, but that's a tough one to get across the finish line. I think it's the most difficult of all. And you can't use her own statement, right?
I know.
She had limited immunity, didn't she? Multiple times.
Right. So anything that she testifies to or says, you can't, that cannot be used against her. But if you have other evidence or able to get that evidence in another way, you can use it. I always thought the only way the Adelsons get out of this, and I don't think all of them could get out of it, is if one fell on the sword.
Yeah.
And it didn't happen. Like the mom didn't do it for Charlie. Charlie's not going to do it for his mother.
No.
The part that I don't understand that makes me think that maybe Wendy didn't know, or she's like, why is she in her initial interview?
The only people I could think of, my family hates them.
Right. Like, why is she doing that?
I don't know.
And she's a lawyer. I'm like,
yeah.
She's not a Harvard lawyer though. Let's keep it.
No.
Like her husband was the Harvard lawyer. He was the smart. Like,
she did night school.
Why is she doing that? And that's the only thing that puts me in the place of like, she wasn't in on it.
Unless
but
that's
if she was,
power move you've ever seen.
Right. Like really cold. Like, oh my goodness, she's taken out her family.
Mind effery of the first degree.
Well, potentially it has worked, right? Because she's been free the whole time.
Guilt and gaslighting.
Well, I just hope that Ruth and her husband see justice for Dan. I know that they're getting a little older, and I know they want to see it through.
It's become less about him and more about the Adelsons.
I know.
It's like the Jennifer Dulos case. I keep saying Michelle Troconis because she was the defendant. It's the Jennifer Dulos case.
Yeah,
Susan Powell, Anna Walsh, Suzanne Simpson, Mamta Bhatt. That's
it's interesting when you say in naming it after someone, right? Because at Court TV, we name trials or brand trials, and there's a mixed thought on all of this, which is
there's no right or wrong.
Well, and here's where the blowback came during Derek Chauvin's trial. There was a faction of the public that did not want it to be the George Floyd trial because George Floyd's not on trial.
Yeah.
But the way you look at things is the way I look at things, that it's always about we try to make it about the victim. Like when you name it after the victim, that is not incriminating them. But there was a faction of the public that felt that it's not the George Floyd trial. Well, he's the victim in this case. Whereas we look at it like, well, a lot of times we're attached to the case because of the victim, and we name it after the victim, or we brand it, or we know it by the victim. So that's why it depends upon your perspective, because that was an actual conversation that was taking place during the course of that trial for every network, everyone that was covering it. So you have to be, it's like our sensitivities are towards the victims and acknowledging and recognizing them. If we don't acknowledge and recognize the victim and we only talk about the defendant during a trial, are we really doing this thing justice? Whereas the perception was the exact opposite during the Derek Chauvin trial.
Right. Yeah. For me, it's very pragmatic. If I'm talking about the case, it's the Mamta Bhatt case. But this will be the Naresh Bhatt trial.
Let's go to Karen Reed. So in that case, there is blowback from the victim side saying, why is this? It should be it's about John O'Keefe. Yeah. And the exact opposite was true in the Derek Chauvin case. So the place where I land on all of this is if you are showing people a trial, if you're talking about a story or a trial, if there is a general consensus on how people recognize it, that's what I think is the appropriate name. It's not about, it can't be about who's the victim. It can't be about who's the defendant, because I don't go in and check in with everyone to say, is it okay if we name it this? Is it okay if we name it that? We name it after how it's known.
People read way too much subtext into the context.
They do. And it's their perspective. And as a member of the media and as a journal, I don't think we have to jump in that boat. Yeah, we can be sensitive to a certain extent, but
it's a little much.
What the individual who's making noise about something in one case doesn't realize is the history that has led up to this point of how I've been through this with people who don't want the victim name, people who do want the victim name.
You can't make everybody happy.
You never can.
It won't happen.
So to me, it really comes down to the way you cover a story, the way you cover a case, the way you cover a trial.
Absolutely.
And it's not so much just about a name. The name is so people recognize and say, okay, that's what you're talking about. Let me listen. There's no alternate agenda that we have in the naming. It's just so people recognize it and watch.
Yeah. Well, the last thing we'll ask you about, and then we'll let you go. The CEO Red Rummer.
Yes.
There's a lot going on the internet now about, and you said the term jury nullification, that they are concerned about that if he goes to trial. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, jury nullification is something a lawyer cannot specifically ask for. So you can't argue that to the jury.
Correct. Yeah.
A jury, like I said before, like I know that a jury can do whatever they want. But jurors generally follow the rules. So I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think 12 people will agree to send him on his way. No way. No. I think there's a chance that you could get a stealth juror, a juror with an agenda that doesn't reveal that agenda, get on there to try to make their point and plant their ground. But they're not going to convince the other ones.
Right. At best, they're going to hang it.
Yeah, at best it's a hung jury, but I don't think it will be. I really don't. The evidence is overwhelming. I think the only defense lies within what's going on between his ears. If there was some mental break that could reduce his, and I think that's what the arguments will be about. Will not be about he didn't do it. They're not about his level of culpability. Because it's based upon from his perspective, not from the outside looking in. It's from you. Like you have to go inside his mind and what's going on. And I don't know the specifics of what the dynamic was, and I'm not sure. I've seen mixed reports now that he may not have been suffering from excruciating back pain. I don't know.
Like, I guess my thought train, if it's still on the tracks there, is thinking about insanity. That's a really, really high standard to hit, isn't it?
Oh, it's super high. Well, insanity, and when it works is when someone, and it usually works with mothers and their children, when a mother is so broken mentally that she believes her actions are actually saving her children, like saving them from the devil. And God has spoken to you and told you to do this to save them from the devil. That's when it works. And usually the experts on both sides agree. There are a lot of people who are found legally insane that never go to trial. It may not be on a red rum, it'll be on something else. But there are lots of them, because what happens is an expert for the defense and an expert either for the court or for the prosecution evaluates them, and they agree. When they agree, then they are put into that position as a patient who is monitored by the court, but not someone who goes to trial. It's when the experts on both sides disagree is when it goes to trial. And that's why rarely do you see it successful. We've only seen it a few times through the years be successful when experts disagree. And it's just one expert is a little bit more convincing than the other based upon the evidence.
Right.
Can I ask you an opinion question? We've seen some uncanny patterns, especially in the last couple of days. I superimposed 2 headlines next to each other the other day. Suzanne Simpson and Mamta, down to the items their DNA are being found on, saws, the Home Depot trips, the haphazard cleanups, the vast blood evidence, the dumpster trips. These cases are Google searches, thank you, are starting to almost look formulaic. And we know that these formulas don't necessarily work. Obviously, these people don't. They don't watch true crime, the news, or Google anything that's commonsensical. What do you make of this? Is this it all in my head, or are you seeing this too, where there's this distinct pattern?
Yeah.
I can't make sense of it.
That's something, it's really common at Court TV, having gone through all these years and all these cases, all these trials, to kind of draw back on other ones and make the comparison. But right now they're like at contemporaneous comparisons that you can make. And what it comes down to, from my perspective, is this is not premeditated. This is not planned. This is all, what do you do after you, as Mr. DV, engage in this conduct, and then you've crossed that line, and now this person is no longer with us. Now I've got to cover my tracks, and it's the only way that they know a little bit. All right, I need to clean it up. I need to get rid of it. I'll go to Home Depot to do it. I'll buy hundreds of dollars of cleaning stuff when I've never purchased it before in my life. And I need some bags as well, right?
Yeah.
But this is the hapless husband running through Home Depot looking for cleaning supplies he's never used before, and he can't call his wife to tell him where it is in the store because
it's scramble panic mode is what it is. And you're designing a plan after you've committed the act.
Right.
Which makes it much more sloppy, and you can't get – it's so much more difficult these days to get away with it. Years ago, though, think about it. Like without surveillance video and license plate readers and cameras and digital footprints and cell phones, you could do all this. And I'm sure men for years did this and got away with it.
It was absolutely premeditated, not for the moment in time that it happened. And there is a lot of evidence that this was not only premeditated, but he wasn't very good at not hiding that this was sort of this building climax. Even one of the friends that Saatchi interviewed said, I'm worried you're going to hurt each other. One of you is going to die. We firmly believe that this was premeditated, that it was going to happen, but this particular day and moment in time was not the plan. That's why he's panicking and scrambling. What's amazing to me is that knowing what we know about his behavior and the evidence that we've looked at, and I took a drive around Northern Virginia to the relevant places he dumped things or his cell phone pinged, and I connected those dots. They're all in the same area. They're not far apart. This was well planned, partially. It's mind-blowing to me how someone can think so much about certain details and completely forget about all of the ways you can get caught doing something this brazen and this stupid. But he did.
Now, I'm wondering if in his native country, would this have been investigated the same way?
Probably not.
So I think that's part and parcel of some of the mentality, is that maybe, something like this might be easier to get away with in another country that doesn't have the same level of sophistication and may have other biases in investigating cases like this. Right.
Yeah.
So
is it ambassadors, or is it just like cultural organization? A lot of local Nepali organizations and individuals have come to his aid, at least before his arrest. They were helping him do interviews.
I think it was the cultural. I think it was just cultural organizations that came through, and it's. I don't see it ending well for him.
He tells the police, by the way, I'm going to take baby back to Nepal now. They go to his house. His stuff is everywhere. Their passports are on the counter. Everything has been emptied. The next day, they got a warrant for his arrest because they knew he was going to take off with this child. He was brazen enough to tell the police that because he figured they're not going to be able to do anything about it. I'm just giving you some courtesy information. We're leaving. He did not even think that would be problematic for him.
And if he had just taken off, like if he had taken off initially, like
he
right away,
he could have just left and not warned them. It's either just complete lack of common sense, or he really genuinely did not believe that they'd be able to do anything about it,
or would want to do anything about it.
Correct.
Yeah. We want justice for Mamta. I think she'll get it. I'm
think
not
so,
too
too.
worried about it, but we don't want to hold Vinnie hostage. We are so grateful that you came on here, Vinnie, to chat with us about everything.
Thanks for coming into the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Oh, great to spend some time with you. I mean, this is fun.
Well, we will link all of Vinnie's things down below. We are going to let you guys know how to find him. And Vinnie, thank you so much. We're so grateful for you.
Yes, thank you.
And hopefully we'll be able to chat again.
Yeah, hopefully.
All right. We'll make it an annual.
Just once a year. We'll take it.
Well,
technically the year's over in 2 weeks. So
yeah. No, it's fine. Start over. We're so stupid.
So extra.
We have no business being on the internet.